Welcome. We'll get started in just a couple minutes as people are coming in. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're just going to move into posting this live on Facebook right now. If you would like to share what is being posted on Facebook Live, you can, there we are. Welcome everyone on Facebook. You can go to DVU's Facebook page and you can go ahead and just share it from there. All right, everybody. So welcome. Hi, everyone. We're still coming in. Hold on, let me turn my sound down so I'm not hearing my own voice. Welcome, everybody. And we are going to get started right now, as soon as I go like this and share on Facebook on my personal page. All right. So welcome, everybody. My name is Judy Mark. I'm the president of Disability Voices United. I'm also the parent of a self-determination participant and am one of the co-founders of our organization. If you've not heard of us, you're going to see a lot of things in the chat by our communications and development coordinator, Ed Herzl, who is going to be your connection to this meeting today. And you should feel free to look at some of the resources that we have available on our interchange, our self-determination interchange, including the recordings of the more than 50 past SDP Connects that we've had for the past year and 4 or 5 months. So we've done a lot of these. We're repeating them now because we have a new crowd of folks, but today is not a repeated SDP Connect. We are talking about some new issues today, and we are really thrilled to have with us 2 representatives from the Department of Developmental Services, or DDS. DDS, for those of you who may not know what that is the state agency that that provides funding to regional centers and your self-determination programs. They have contracts with all 21 regional centers, and they basically write specific directions to regional centers and to the general community about how to implement the self-determination program. And they do that in various ways. One of the ways they do it is through what's called a directive. Another way they do that is through the frequently asked questions, or FAQs, that are on their website. I will get the link to that thrown in the chat, or any of the DDS folks can throw that in there as well, so people can go directly to the FAQs. So I want to introduce our presenters today, and they have been incredibly supportive of the self-determination program, one of which from the very beginning. I want to introduce Catherine Blakemore first. Catherine is a consultant to the Department of Developmental Services. Prior to that role, she was the executive director for many years of Disability Rights California, which was one of the co-sponsors of the self-determination law. So there's pretty much, she basically wrote most of the law, and there's pretty much no one else who's more of an expert on it. And we're thrilled to have her now at DDS consulting on the implementation of this project. With her is Tim Travis. Tim Travis is the manager of the self-determination program and home and community-based services program at the Department of Developmental Services. It's often called SDP for Self-Determination Program and HCBS for Home and Community-Based Services. I try not to use acronyms if I don't have to. And we're thrilled that both of you are here. I know that you have a presentation, but I'm going to let you take it away, and you can share the screen when you need to. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Judy. Again, my name is Tim Travis. I am the manager for the self-determination program and the home and community-based services regulations at the department. And I'll be asking my coworker, Carolina Vargas, if she could share her screen so we can see the presentation for today.
Before we get started, I meant to mention, because this is going to come up, that you have 2 ways you'll be able to ask questions of Tim and Catherine. The first way is to put it in the chat and Ed is going to catalog those and ask those on your behalf. You can also use the raise hand feature by going down to the bottom of your screen, clicking on reactions and raising your hand. And we'll call you and we'll allow you to unmute yourself in order to do that. So go right ahead. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, thanks again, Judy. I appreciate that. So today we were asked to provide some information. I know Judy talked a little bit about it earlier, about the different ways that the department gets information out to both the regional centers and the community regarding the self-determination program. And to her point, sometimes that is done through directives, also could be done through guidance. And then also through frequently asked questions. And so recently, as we know, there was an announcement that was sent out by DVU regarding some changes that recently were made to our frequently asked questions. And so Judy invited us today to come and to speak about those and provide that information to this group. So Caroline, if we could have the next slide, please. So as we mentioned a little bit earlier, the self-determination program, recently we're going through the process of updating our frequently asked questions and our directives in relation to the changes that went through with the governor approving the trailer bill language to the statute for the self-determination. The department recently updated its FAQs about the self-determination spending plan. Those changes are now allowing a spending plan to estimate the cost of a good or service, not requiring that a specific provider be listed in the spending plan, because we know that oftentimes, much like in the traditional system, individuals may not know who that service provider is as they're going about trying to find those individuals that would be able to implement the outcomes and needs in their individual program plan. We provided some additional clarification regarding those services that could be purchased outside of the self-determination program. As we know, the services that are provided in the self-determination program need to be eligible for federal financial reimbursement. And so there are some of those services that need to be paid or purchased outside of that particular system. And so we provided some additional clarification about that. Those include competitive integrative employment, the paid internship program, SSP and SSI. And also we put in information regarding rental assistance for adult consumers in supported living when they are following the requirement in Welfare Institutions Code 4689I. And a little bit later on in our presentation, we'll provide a little bit more detail about that. Next slide, please. So what happens if I don't know the exact cost of a service or good in my spending plan? Well, there are several things that you can do. You could ask others, such as your regional center service coordinator, maybe your independent facilitator or FMS, to help you identify the cost of a service or item. If you don't know the specific cost of the item, you could also estimate the cost based on information that you may have, whether it be through that 12-month budget that you receive from the regional center or through other resources. If needed, you could also adjust your spending plan when you know the actual cost. Next slide, please. What if I don't know who will provide a service when I develop my spending plan? If you don't know who will provide a specific service, you can do the following. You could identify the type of provider that would provide each service. For example, if you need assistance with personal care, you can say that the service would be provided by a personal care assistant. You don't need to name that specific provider in your spending plan. And this is much like what occurs in the traditional system, where oftentimes as needs are identified, you may not necessarily know that service provider as you're going and looking and trying to find and locate that particular individual. And I will turn it over to Catherine.
Perfect. So nice to see all of you. Thanks again for inviting us. I'm going to talk a little bit about the kinds of services and items that can be purchased outside of the spending plan. And what Tim said at the very beginning is the reason for that. Under self-determination, things have to be eligible for what's called the federal match. We have to be able to get federal Medicaid funds, but some things are excluded from that. And DDS wanted to provide the opportunity for people to have access to those same items in self-determination as they do in the traditional system. So the recent addition to the spending plan identified when, the things that could be provided, as well as including one of the, including the rental assistance that Tim mentioned. So as we said, generally a participant purchase things that they need out of their individual budget. Sometimes people need additional services and supports to meet their needs and support the principles of self-determination. So the following things that are listed at the very end of this slide are the things that can be paid for outside of the individual budget. Those include costs for insurance, co-payments, deductibles or co-insurance, competitive integrated employment incentives, the paid internship program payments, rental payments or assistance consistent with the Welfare and Institutions Code. And we're going to talk about that one because that's really the most significant addition in a little bit. And then your SSI or SSP, which stands for your state supplemental payment in addition to SSI. So those are the list of things that can be paid outside of the individual budget. So let's talk a little bit more about that, Carolina, because you show the next slide. So what are the circumstances when an adult self-determination participant can receive rental assistance? So regional centers don't provide rental assistance unless specific conditions are met, and the regional center executive director certifies that those conditions are met. And the Welfare and Institutions Code section is the one that's listed there, 4689, allows rental payments to be made for adult consumers receiving supported living services in the three following limited circumstances. So you have to meet these three criteria. The first is that there has to be a health and safety risk. So the rental assistance is required to meet the consumer's specific care needs in their IPP, and it's needed because the consumers demonstrated medical, behavior, or psychiatric conditions which present a health and safety risk to the consumer or another individual. So it may be that you have an individual with autism who has some behavioral challenges, and because of those behavioral challenges, they can't have a roommate as other people might, another regional center consumer living in the supported living arrangement, and that might make the cost of the rent higher, and therefore the regional center could pay some of the rent, provide some rental assistance because of that consumer's needs related to their disability that pose this health and safety risk. Let's go to the next slide. The second is that the supported living services provider has to assist the consumer in accessing all sources of generic and natural supports consistent with the needs of the consumer. So an example of that might be the regional center of the consumer might be eligible for some subsidized housing or some other housing supports through a housing agency. So before the regional center could provide the rental assistance, the supported living services provider would have to assist the person in seeing if they could access those. We all appreciate that those services are limited. They're not going to always be available, but we have to at least try to access those other kinds of supports. And then the third criteria is that it has to be time limited. So rental assistance is limited generally to 6 months unless the regional center finds that it's needed to meet the individual consumer's IPP needs, reviews the finding of necessity on a quarterly basis, and that regional center executive director annually verifies that the requirements for providing rental assistance continue to be met. So there'll be an ongoing review process. The criteria that I just went through are exactly the same criteria that apply in the traditional system. So what this is doing is saying a person who needs rental assistance and meets this criteria can get that assistance in the traditional program, or they can also get that same assistance in the self-determination program if that's the way that they prefer to receive their services. Okay, the next slide. I'm going to just go through a couple of other things and then we'll be able to answer your questions. So the next question is, are there limits to what can be included in the spending plan? And a spending plan can only include goods and services needed to implement the participant's IPP. The goods and services are not available from generic resources like IHSS, Medi-Cal, or local schools. And goods and services must be eligible for federal financial participation. That's making sure that the service is something that the federal government through the Medicaid program will reimburse the state for. And the next slide. Can the regional center review the spending plan? So we know that the IPP team jointly develops and approves the IPP. And then they approve the services and supports through an individual budget that are ultimately paid for by the participant's spending plan. That once the participant completes their spending plan, the regional center reviews it to make sure that the goods and services are eligible for federal funding and that the goods and services are not available through generic agencies. As a result of a recent change in the statute, the spending plan is also attached to the IPP. And I think that takes us to the important part of hearing from you. People have questions and what they want to ask. I think there might have been some in the chat, but I was busy looking at the slides. Not looking
don't worry. We got
Thank you. That's your job, Judy. Perfect.
So why don't you go ahead and stop sharing screen so that we can see everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn, for doing that.
Yes, thank you so much, Carolyn.
You're welcome.
So as I mentioned earlier, something I forgot to mention is that we do have interpretation available. People know this, our Spanish speakers and our Korean speakers know to automatically go in there. Although I did just see that I let in our Spanish interpreter again just a second ago. So there may have been a problem with Spanish interpretation for a moment. So I apologize. But for those of you who are English speakers, you should be choosing English as your language, because we often get Spanish speakers to ask questions and you will not be able to hear the simultaneous interpretation in English if you do not choose Spanish. Okay, so you can ask questions in two ways. One, you can do it in the chat, or you can use the raise hand feature by going to the bottom of your screen, clicking on reactions and choosing the raise hand. Okay. We will allow you to unmute if you have a question. I have a question that is so basic, but I find that it is not in plain language. So I was hoping that you would define it. What does goods mean? Because nobody uses the term goods in the real world. It seems to be a Medicaid term. What are goods?
Tim, you want me to answer? Or you want to answer?
I'm going to defer to you.
Okay. I'm not an. So goods means items that you would buy. So if it's part of your IPP, it was determined that you needed a way to communicate and you were developing your spending plan and said, I want to buy a piece of assistive technology, or I want to buy something that has text to speech so that I can communicate, that's a good. Some people also need goods that will help meet their medical needs, right? So they might have a condition that requires a good that isn't provided under their insurance company, and there would be an option to be able to get that good or that item also provided. So think of it, you can get services that are provided by people and things that you want to buy that are part of your IPP. That's what a good or an item is. That's simpler, Judy?
Yes, I use the term item because I know that it's not like people, I think goods is a very old fashioned term that people like probably my mother used. So I try to use the word item, but because that is so much part of the FAQs, I wanted to make sure we defined it for everyone.
Excellent.
It is different than a service, everyone. A service is something that's generally provided by another person who's providing assistance or support to you to be in the community and to meet your IPP goals. So I'm going to turn over to Carla Lehman right now so she can ask our first question.
Hi, everybody. I have a question in regards of the copayments. So I know that it has to be out in the traditional system, but what about if you don't qualify in the traditional system to get reimbursed for copayments, but you want to put it in the spending plan without requesting additional funding? Is that something that is possible to do, and it would be under like the goods and services that we were just talking about code?
So I guess help me understand why you can't access that in the traditional system.
Because to be able to get reimbursement for copayments, you need to be, I think, financially under the poverty, 400% of the poverty line. I think that's, so if you don't qualify, but you still, need that help because it's really, really expensive. Like, for example, ABA, you have to pay every day, like $30. It adds up a lot of money. So is that something that you could put in the spending plan, like copayments or insurance?
Okay, so I guess first of all, you have to understand that you don't put this in. So these are things that are paid outside of your spending plan. So what I gave you was the list of things that the federal government wouldn't allow to be paid in the self-determination because it has to be eligible for a federal match. So these would continue to be paid outside of the individual budget. So you can't add it to your individual budget, but you can have it paid outside of your individual budget if you're eligible for it.
So you cannot put it in the spending
That's
plan?
correct. So the list of things that was on that list, so SSI, SSP payments, competitive integrated employment incentives, insurance co-payments, the rental assistance, none of that goes into your budget. These are things that DDS has said are important for people to have access to. They can't be part of the individual budget. So instead, we're going to allow people to get them just as they would in the traditional system.
Okay. But just to clarify what I'm saying, like if you don't qualify in the traditional system, you cannot, without requesting additional money, you cannot put it in the spending.
Correct, because they have to be paid outside of the individual budget.
And I think too, some of the other things you may want to consider is that individuals under the age of 18 may be eligible to receive Medi-Cal as a secondary insurance through the institutional deeming program. So that would be something that could be utilized to assist with those additional payments or other services that may not be covered under someone's private insurance.
Yes, but when you have private insurance, the secondary medical, it doesn't pay for copayments because you have to be under straight medical. So a lot of the providers don't take it. So that's the problem with that. So that's why. And a lot of providers don't take medical. So that's the problem.
Yeah, I get it. It's tricky. It's very tricky.
Yeah.
Thanks, Carla.
Thank you.
Ed, I've seen a bunch of different questions in the chat. Are you ready to ask them?
Sure am. So our first one is anonymous. What happened to the IHSS certification training for $3 higher pay an hour that Julie talked about in the summer? She also talked about an IHSS provider that will receive some kind of $500 one-time remuneration during this pandemic. Can you speak to that?
So that's not necessarily what we're talking about today, but I don't know. It looked like Catherine, you had something on that.
Oh, I just was going to say that was part of the state's ARPA plan, the HCBS plan. So one of their proposals portions of that plan were just approved and it's posted on the Department of Healthcare Services website. There's a letter indicating what's approved. So and I think it was just approved
Yes.
in October, end of September or October. So things got delayed. So while, the state was saying, here's the things we're intending to do, it then had to go to the federal government. There was some back and forth, and then it just was approved. So what I would do is look at the Department of Healthcare Services website, see if that was a portion that was approved, and then it would really be the Department of Social Services, not DDS, that would be developing the plans to implement whatever was changing in IHSS.
Great.
Hopefully that's
Thank
not
you.
too confusing.
But regardless, if there's a $3 increase in IHSS wages, that would not have any impact necessarily on your self-determination budget, because the IHSS is your generic resource. So I just want to make that clear.
Excellent.
However, when rates get increased for the traditional service providers, you do have that opportunity to increase your budget based on the rates in the traditional system. All right, go ahead, Ed.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So from Nirmala, what happens with those who already have a spending plan with a provider listed, but that particular provider is not providing service anymore? And what if the cost is different in the market than from what we agreed to?
Tim, you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think one of the things to do is to go back to that IPP team, because in the statute, there's that allowance to be able to adjust that budget up and down based on unmet needs or changes in circumstances. So again, I think, going back to the IPP team to discuss that and seeing whether or not that would meet the eligibility of that particular statute. I think much like in traditional services, oftentimes there is going to be that where maybe a service provider is not able to provide services any longer, or maybe they weren't able to provide services beforehand. So being able to make that change in the spending plan. And then of course, working with your financial management service provider to have them onboarded and be with them and be eligible to receive that reimbursement.
Thanks, Tim. Ed, next question.
Certainly. I have a question from Lourdes. We all know there is low income housing in California, but they have a minimum of 5 years waiting list in major cities. Are those clients expected to wait that long, or can they apply to more than 6 to 12 individual applications meet the generic resources availability? I'm not clear on that last sentence. I apologize.
That's okay. So I think the question went back to the criteria that you had to establish to be able to get the rental assistance. So remember, it only applies for adults and for people that are in a supported living program. But if you fall in that category, one of the things that has to happen is you have to sort of try to get the other assistance that's available. It may not always be available. And if you can say, we got our name on the list, but we're number, 10,000 and we're not going to get it soon, that means you will have met that criteria. You don't have to wait until it's available. If you ultimately got if you ultimately got the rental subsidy, then that would be a discussion about, then you may not need the rental assistance from the regional center at that point, but it's not a barrier to getting it. You simply have to try to get whatever other housing resources are available.
Thanks, Catherine. Ed, go ahead.
Sure. I have a question from Jacqueline. Can tutoring, such as Linda Mood Bell, be covered?
Linda Mood Bell, I'm not familiar with.
Oh, so it's a program that a lot of students with disabilities use to help, particularly those with language processing problems, with learning disabilities. It's a really great way for individuals to be able to learn in their own unique way. I have never used it, but I've heard many parents speak very highly of it. So how would someone be able to use this, knowing that I've never heard in my life of a school district actually paying for Linda Mood Bell, but how would that work?
Well, I think, the first part is to look at that IPP, because the services that are purchased in self-determination, need to be linked to an outcome or a need. And then to look also, because one of the things with self-determination is that settings need to be compliant with the home and community-based services final rule. So also ensuring that any of those services that are currently being purchased meet that particular requirement. So I think initially to the question would be to go back to the IPP team to identify the need and then to assess that particular setting as to whether or not it meets that final rule requirement.
And someone in the chat I just observed noted that they, from their school district, I don't think it was that particular program, but had gotten a school district to pay for it, what might appear to be something similar. So just building on what Tim said, I think it has to be connected to an IPP goal. And second, you have to show that it's not available through a generic resource, and school districts are considered a generic resource. So I think you'd have to start, if you're talking about a child, you would have to start with your school district that would be considered a generic resource and find out whether you could get it from them. And then
I see Sue Gavin saying that some districts have paid for it. So I do believe that it is worth asking for there first, and then you can see if it meets an IPP goal if you get turned down from your regional center. I'm turned down from your school district. Connie Lapin, Harvey Lapin, not sure which one of you all.
Boss.
It's me, Connie.
Hi, Connie.
Thank you, Catherine and Tim. This is,
Yeah.
you speak good English.
Yeah.
I mean, you explain it really well, and I really appreciate it. We all know the person-centered plan is the cornerstone of self-determination. But when we talk about the spending plan, we're talking about the IPP team. I'd like some more clarification of the IPP team, because sometimes it's just viewed as the regional center telling us what we can or can't do. And I think we all need to know that the families or the person with the disability are part of that team.
And what else? If.
So who wants?
Great question,
Well,
Connie.
I think that, I guess I'll say just generally, and Tim can certainly weigh in too, is that in self-determination and soon in the traditional system, there's a requirement that we really start with a person-centered plan. And the person-centered plan is thinking about, sort of longer term, what are the hopes and dreams this person has? What do they want their life to be about? And that information then is used by the IPP team to develop the what does the person need now? What are the annual goals, etc. So I think if we start thinking about the system in the way that starts from person-centered planning, then we understand from the beginning that it's really about the individual, and that they're the focus of any discussion. And certainly the individual and their family or other people they invite are at least an equal participant in the IPP team, where the focus is on how are we going to implement the person-centered planning, and what are we going to do in this year to help the person advance the goals that they have for their life.
And that was, I was just going to, echo your comments, Catherine, about the IPP team, really circled around the particular individual, and then those individuals or those people that individual would like to have be part of that IPP team would also be invited and be able to participate in the development of that, really focusing on it being that person-centered approach with the individual program plan.
Connie, you muted yourself again.
Oh my God. Oh, I did. Yeah, I just feel I would love the department to really emphasize the person with the disabilities role and the family's role, because I've heard over some of these calls, which are great. Thank you, Judy, is that there's these other meetings going on, and there shouldn't be those other meetings. It should be the IPP team with the family and the consumer.
Yeah. We at DVU, working with DRC and a few other organizations like the ICC, have grave concerns about IPP decisions being made by a group of folks. They're also often called the clinical team or the POS group or whatever. We have some grave concerns that decisions are being made about services and overruling the IPP team. So, but that's a whole different issue. And we are going to be talking about that here at DVU in the month of December. We promise you. Elizabeth Gomez. You can unmute yourself now. There you go.
I am muted myself. Okay. No, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to ask this question. And I think it has a little bit to do with that, special team or clinical team. So for year 2, one of the things that we started to see is that the budgets are allocated for only 6 months to what they consider a clinical team decision. That families have to come back 6 months later and ask for the remainder of the 6 months. But the requirement is that they only allocate the 6-month budget. And I like to get some clarity on that, because that was not part of any conversation, whether year 1 or anything. So these are issues that are happening now, and decisions that are being made at regional centers. Nothing in writing. There's nothing to tell families, prepare for this, or this is the way things are changing. And this is a serious concern, because it's affecting especially the families who have very small budgets to begin with. And one of the main problem with that is that families cannot even secure their staff for the whole year, because you can't offer a job if you don't know if you're going to have those funds come 6 months later. So that's a big problem. So I like to have some I don't know if you can give me some information about that.
So this issue I know came up, Nancy Bargman and Tim presented at the statewide self-determination advisory committee, probably a little less
Last
than a
Wednesday,
week ago.
yeah.
Thank you. I don't know. It
A week
feels
ago
like
today.
a month. It feels like a month ago. How much has happened since then. And I know that issue was raised, and my sense is that Nancy's now aware of the issue, and there's going to be some discussion about that. So that I don't think there's an answer right now, but I think there's certainly an appreciation of the challenge that it is posing for people trying to move into the self-determination program.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for understanding the challenge, because it is very difficult to retain good staff. And even in the traditional system, I know they're having problems, having good providers. But in self-determination, when you have to do it yourself and you have to find and get really creative, how do you keep them? And then that uncertainty, whether you can hold them and keep the job going for the whole year, it's a big problem. So I hope that we get some clarity in that. But thank you for
Thanks,
sharing
Elizabeth,
that.
for the question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ed, I'm going to throw it back to you because there's a lot of stuff going on in the chat.
There sure is. My next question is from Chuck. Who is responsible for creating the budget, the regional center or the consumer? Our regional center says they are working on our budget and will present it to us when it is ready.
So it's actually the IPP team that develops the budget. It's a little hard for the question to understand exactly what point in the process you are. So the first thing that happens is the regional center provides a list of the prior year expenditures for people that have 12 months of expenditures. And that becomes sort of the starting point for the discussion. For some people, what they got last year will be fine. Other people might have unmet needs or a change in circumstances. And then there would be a discussion about whether that budget needs to increase, but it's always the IPP team that develops the budget. And then after the IPP team develops the budget, the regional center director or their designee has to certify the budget that is the appropriate budget. So there's sort of two points at which the regional center does some things by themselves, but the actual budget development is done by the IPP team.
So if somebody is basically being told by the regional center, you'll get your budget when we have time to get you your budget, what would be your recommendation to them? To call to ask for an IPP meeting and to say that there's an expectation that the budget would be discussed at that meeting, correct?
Right, and that's in statute as well.
Okay. So everyone should know that according to the Land Term Act, you can ask for an IPP at any time. It doesn't have to happen that day. There are actually statutory requirements. I believe I could get this wrong, so don't quote me. I believe it's 30 days for a regular IPP and possibly 7 days for a crisis IPP.
Yeah,
I believe that's what it is. So go ahead. Go ahead, Ed.
Yep. Next question is from Yadira. if the regional center is supposed to be reviewing the spending plan for one, federal financial participation, and two, for generic agency availability, does that mean that they're not supposed to review or argue based on natural supports or parental responsibility for spending plan items?
Great question.
I mean, wouldn't those be the generic natural supports and?
No, that's different. So what I've heard is that there are some regional centers who are saying the parents should be paying for that. So as you give your spending plan, you'll say, okay, we're going to spend $1,500 for the year for swimming team or for a dance, exercise class or something. And they'll come back and say, that's really the responsibility of the parents. So it has nothing to do, they've even actually said it's the responsibility, you should use your ABLE account, which we know for sure is not the case. That was a clear direction, by the way, from DDS at a meeting a couple of weeks ago with the ABLE account folks.
And it's also in the FAQ
specifically
specifically about not having to use ABLE accounts.
Great. So, and an ABLE account is like any kind of bank account, but that is different than what some regional centers are saying. The parents should be paying for Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts or Sundays. I don't know that the Sunday school, but basic sort of activities. So I have read the law. I participated in writing the law. I have not seen anything in there that says you need to have natural supports pay for things in the self-determination law. However, it is flagged in some parts of the Lanterman Act. So we need some clarity on that. Maybe you want to get back to us on it?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
It would be very helpful to have clarity on natural supports because it has been getting in the way. I would say it's not like hugely widespread, but I've heard it enough where it's a concern. All right, I'm going to go to Debbie Wexler. Go ahead, Debbie. You're unmuted.
Hi, yeah, I got it. Sorry. I have a son that's 34 and he's had in this traditional program services, he's had supported living, he's had a day program, and he's had supported employment, and sometimes there's been the discussion to do PIP with him for employment purposes. And this was the first time in this presentation that I had heard that the PIP and the SEP are going to fall outside of the spending plan. So it sounds like to me, we're in the middle of just getting person-centered planning completed at this point, and we have the past expenditures, so we have that to kind of look at this point in time. But it sounds to me like there's going to be two parallel kind of agreements going on. There'll be the agreement with the self-determination portion of a program, and then there's going to be an agreement with the regional center for the other way that I'm assuming that SEP or PIP would continue to get funded. And that seems really confusing to me. I'm just trying to get a grip on what would that look like in terms of managing the overall thing.
So I guess I just want to start, and then Tim can talk more about the details. Is the reason that happens is because the federal government will not allow certain things to be paid for out of the individual budget, right?
Yeah,
and
I got
so
that.
It's for a good reason that DDS is actually trying to be flexible and think about how to meet people's needs, right?
Mhm.
So in your IPP, you would indicate, I think, that you want to participate in the, let's just say the supported employment, the performance portion, the incentive payments of for employment supports, and that would be included within the IPP, and the regional center would then separately pay the incentive payment to the group that was eligible for it, right? So that would be how that would be managed, and then the rest of the money goes through your budget.
So it would seem like then if that agency did like quarterly reports or annual reports or all the usual stuff in the standard, traditional services, that part of my son's IPP would still be kind of going the old system way.
Not
Exactly.
everything, only that list of the 5 things that were on that list, right?
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Because those can't be folded into the individual budget.
Yeah. Thank
And
you.
one of the things I want to mention, Debbie, is that the fact that the competitive integrated employment and the paid internship program, which is what she's been saying, PIP and CIE, that has been known for a long time, for a number of years, that is outside the spending plan. Regional centers received that directive probably in 2018. And so, if you hadn't heard of it, the regional center should have known it, is my point. So it's not like we're providing any new information about that. The new piece about that is that rental assistance, if you qualify for that, that has now been added to that list that already existed. Okay. Oops.
Yeah.
Oh, she wants you to say one more thing. Go ahead.
So what I'm aware of right now, like when I get the budget report for previous year's expenditures, I see that the agency that works with my son for supported employment, they are receiving money from the regional center itself. So are they also getting funding from Department of Rehab or whomever, works with the employment piece? Is there something going on there that I'm not even aware they might be getting?
Well, in order for the regional center to have funded that in the traditional system that supported employment, the individual would first have had to go to Department of Rehab and potentially, if they did not qualify for the services, then the regional center would pick that up. So was your loved one, were they evaluated by the Department of Rehab?
Not unless it was something that happened within or at the agency through the agency itself. It's nothing that we ever facilitated as parents.
So it doesn't sound like your son, daughter, sorry, I don't know which.
Son.
Son, thank you, is a Department of Rehab client, because you would definitely know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's something else going on. That'd be my quick sense of that.
Okay, great. Thank you. I've
You're
taken
welcome.
enough time.
Thanks, Debbie. Sandra, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to comment on the generic service. My son had been paying for a personal trainer out of pocket because he really needed to lose the weight. And the hope was that he would have enough in his budget to pay for the personal trainer and self-determination. When we turned in the spending plan, they said, well, he's already been paying for it, so he should be continue to pay for it.
So I think this all starts with, is it connected to an IPP goal? And right. And if it is, then that should be evaluated as like you're implementing the IPP, which means it's a regional center eligible service. It sounds, I don't know enough about the specifics of where the service is provided and so forth, but anyway.
Yeah, it's at a regular gym. So it definitely qualifies for HCBS compliance. He's the only person with a disability that he ever even sees there. And that it's been in his IEP or IPP as a goal for about 3 years since he gained 30 pounds. and because he's been working with a personal trainer, he's actually lost 16 of that 30 pounds. So he's on the right track, but it's been an IPP goal even before self-determination.
Yeah, in my opinion, and I'm not DDS, that's a real problem. And so I have to say, in my son's plan, no one has ever asked us if we had been paying out of pocket for any of the services we put in there, because the answer would have been yes for many of them. And that should not be the case. It shouldn't be like, well, now you have to switch and try something completely new, even though what you were doing was working in private pay, just because you were paying for that before. So I think that's really a problem, Sandra, and I would recommend you also talk to the ombudsperson about it.
Oh, I have.
Oh, okay, good. Good, good, good.
She received a very long list from me.
Good. Yeah, yeah. And that's Regional Center of Orange County. I'm seeing in the chat a parent saying that Orange County is telling people that if they want to get social and recreational funding added to their budget, they have to reduce other things in their budget,
Yes,
such as respite.
They have told many of my clients that. So yeah.
That
Same
even
amount of
though
money, it just has to be
Right.
allocated differently.
Which to me makes no sense, since respite is to give the parents a break and social rec is to, well, we know what social rec is for. It's not to give the parents a break, especially when the parents are often at the social and rec programs with their child.
Right, and the solution is like if it's an IPP goal, or if it's not, then you can also adjust the budget as I'm sure you've all talked about many times, up or down because of an unmet need or a change in circumstances, right? So while the budget that you get initially, that's your base budget, isn't set in stone, there's ways to adjust that. So the answer should be, let's see what you can do within your individual budget. You have the ability to be flexible with your spending because that's part of what self-determination is about. But if your needs can't be met and your IPP goals can't be met, then that's the time to have the IPP team decide, does the budget need to be adjusted to accommodate what the services are that you need to implement your goals and meet your needs.
Thanks, Catherine. I'm going to go to Lourdes.
Hi, so I'm gonna show my ignorance and I'm gonna ask the seniors in here. People obviously have been in regional centers lifestyle. Okay, I'm a brand new independent facilitator, less than 5 clients in my whole life. When is it that any regional center client is supposed to get the yearly expenditures? Because all of the families I'm talking to, they haven't received that in more than a year. Did DDS ever waive sending the yearly reports? Because I'm talking to families and they haven't got it in the last year and a half that we have been in the pandemic. I thought it was calendar. I thought it was fiscal. What is the deal with that? How come no family has ever got it unless they're trying to get into self-determination?
I don't know I don't know what's driving that. It's a requirement that everybody get a list of what was purchased on their behalf annually. And that's been in place since I think 2009, and it hasn't been changed. So
it's a problem. People don't get it. I have to tell you that my son has never gotten it without me asking for it in 20 years, ever.
So that might be the solution, I guess, to ask for it.
Right, but many people don't know that they can ask, and it's really
I
the
just was
responsibility of
reflecting on
regional.
Lourdes's question where she knows that it's there and she has the ability, I guess, to help people ask for it, right?
I've been trying. The problem is I've been told that unless I do this, I will receive it, that parents will not get it, or they should have gotten it when it was the yearly time but like that mysteriously has never been publicly said. Are they supposed to receive it in December because it's calendar year? Was in June, so they have to receive it in July? Because no family, Hispanic, I only work with Hispanic families so far. Nobody has had it in the last 2 years. So my question is, do we have to file like a massive, for whatever complaint form it is, so we could have a general idea what the price is, what are we considering? Because we're gonna go in, but we want to be informed consumers. What's the deal with that? Nobody's gonna get it unless we all throw a tantrum, because like you said, it's part of the regulation.
And I think different regional centers are better at it than others. I'm seeing in the chat that people are saying at San Diego and at Lanterman that they've been good about sending their annual statements. Looks like the fiscal year. I know some people get it at their IPPs, but I can tell you, at least at my regional center, people don't get it. People don't get it. So, all right, we're going to move on just because I know that Tim is going to need to leave by 5:30, Catherine by 5:45, and I want to get in a few more questions to them. Go ahead, Evelyn. This is going to be in Spanish, everyone. So you should be selecting the language of English so you hear the simultaneous translation. Go ahead, Evelyn.
Hola, hola Judy, buenas tardes. Yo quería hacer una pregunta. Soy mamá de un consumidor y soy facilitadora independiente para la comunidad latina. Estoy muy preocupada porque el corazón todo nace con el PCP. En el caso del Centro Regional de Orange County, no están aceptando que las metas del PCP lo escribamos en el IPP. Ellos no quieren escribir en el IPP metas donde se diga que el consumidor va a cumplir una meta con un servicio que se va a comprar con fondos de autodeterminación. Por ejemplo, el consumidor va a estar integrado en la comunidad, 3 veces a la semana va a ir a un parque de trampolines, la integradora en la comunidad le va a ayudar con la socialización, qué sé yo. No quieren poner nada que tenga que ver con un servicio que se va a comprar con los fondos de autodeterminación y me preocupa muchísimo. La verdad que uno se siente bien frustrado porque entonces, ¿para qué tanto trabajo? ¿Para qué tanto pensar en crear las metas, discutir? Si a la final es cuando vayamos con el centro regional a sentarnos, te dicen, ok, de tus 5 o 6 metas, solamente una y la voy a escribir como yo quiero, no como tú quieres. Gracias.
Thanks,
So
Evelyn.
I guess I might try and frame how I was approaching the regional center. Like you're writing your IPP goals. I don't think it has to be as specific as I'm going to go to a trampoline park. I would say I want one of my goals to be broader because maybe next week I don't want to go to a trampoline park and instead I want to go to a skating rink or something. So what I want are opportunities to have inclusive activities within my community, because that's how I'm going to, and tie it to what your goal is related to that. It might be to improve my communication or to improve my social skills and make the goal about that. And then when you're getting to your individual budget, you're going to need some services to help you achieve that goal. And then when you get to your spending plan, you can be specific about what it is you want to purchase with that, right? So I think making the IPP goal broader about community inclusion and development of communication, social skills, etc., might be a helpful way to approach that.
I want to apologize to Helen and our Korean participants because I forgot to repeat the question that she could not hear because it was the Spanish interpreter was speaking. So I'll just rephrase the question, even though Catherine has already answered it. Evelyn's question was that she is an independent facilitator for the Latino community, and they spend a lot of time on their creating goals during the person-centered planning. They come to the IPP meetings and they present, for example, 5 goals, and the regional center will say, well, we will only choose one of those goals and we will write it the way we want to write it. So that was a paraphrase completely from my memory. Hopefully I got that mostly right. And I promise the next question that comes in Spanish, I will repeat. Let's go back to the chat. Tim probably has time for only one more question. Ed.
Certainly. Here's our next question. It's anonymous. Please clarify if an IHSS worker can be a provider SDP consumer and provide services. Some regional centers are saying yes, others are saying no.
Oh, you know what this question is about, Tim? This is about the independent part of the independent facilitator piece.
Right, and what that says in statute is that an independent facilitator cannot be a provider of any other service that's in the IPP.
And so the disagreement, at least with DVU and between DVU and DDS on this, is that we do not believe that an IHSS worker is providing a service through the IPP. That the IPP is about services that are related to regional center funded services. And the IHSS is through a different level, a different service provider. And so to say that your IHSS worker cannot provide independent facilitation becomes problematic for some people, but it's even being extended to say that the IHSS worker can't provide any other services, not just independent facilitation, but they cannot provide services of any kind, which is obviously very problematic.
And very different.
Yeah.
Two
So I
different
guess,
things.
Judy, just to the first point, the requirement around providers being independent is actually a federal Medicaid rule, not just a DDS rule. So I think, I don't have it in front of me, but there is a very specific sort of federal statute that has to be complied with in terms of that independence for someone providing a provider not fulfilling other roles because of a potential conflict. So I just think that's more complicated. The only other thing I can think of about the IHSS worker providing other services is the question of when do you have to provide overtime pay? So if you're providing something and you're being paid to what person and you're being paid on IHSS, but over here you're providing some additional services to the individual, but combined you're now working overtime, how does that get sorted out between the two agencies, which gets really complicated? It doesn't mean, I guess, it can't happen. I just want to flag for people that there really is a complexity about managing that and complying with, when it's one person providing those services, complying with the state wage and hour rules that require overtime payment. And it's not unique to self-determination. The same thing happens in supported living and other places where people are trying to be flexible about how those services are provided.
Oh, that's a good answer. So Tim, I want to thank you for joining us today. Everybody, please stay on. Tim, really appreciate you spending time with us today. And we look forward, I'm sure we'll be seeing you very soon on many different Zoom meetings. Have a great evening.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Have a good evening. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone too.
You too. Thanks,
Bye.
Tim. Ed, I'm going to go back to you.
Sure thing. I normally don't do this. I normally go chronologically, but since this relates directly to the question we just addressed, I'm going to address it now. Hawk says, I'm confused. So can an SLS worker also work as an IHSS worker for the same client?
Sometimes that happens. So you're in supported living and your IHSS worker is paid to do a certain number of hours of work for you, but because you have a hard time finding people, you now want that same person to work for you, doing something that's paid out of self-determination. So it's happened in supported living, and it's just complicated to resolve the overtime. I see Will Sanford shaking his head. He's sort of one of the people that's experts about the complexity about that.
Right. And Scott and Lori Shepard as well. I've heard that talk.
So I feel like if somebody really wanted to delve into it, there's people much more expert than I am about the complexities. And I don't know what an FMS, your financial management service, would say about how they want to manage it, but I feel like it's sort of a separate topic worthy of a discussion. That all I really wanted to do was flag there are some legitimate sort of challenges with making that happen.
Got it. Thank you. Go ahead, Ed.
Next question I have from Beverly. If you have personal assistance for your child and you're currently with Premier, and you transition to the self-determination program, can you set the personal assistance hourly wage above what the vendor was paying them per hour on your spending plan?
You want to take that, Catherine?
I was actually I don't know if I know.
The answer is definitely yes.
And you can do that, but you may, by doing that, have less money to spend on something else, might be the reality, right? So you got your budget.
Right.
And now you want to hire somebody at a higher rate. Maybe you want to give them, there's a couple of reasons why you want, now they've been with you for a couple of years and you want to actually pay them more to recognize their they're better skills. Yes, you could do that, but it might mean that you're going to have less money for something else.
Right, because if you continue to use the premier agency, you are continuing to have to pay for their administrative fees. One of the advantages of self-determination is that you don't necessarily have to use an agency in order to hire people. You can hire them directly, and therefore those agency fees, their administrative costs are removed. It still goes into your budget, but you don't have to pay them in your spending plan. So, so the one rule that I know about wages when it comes to using traditional service providers is that I don't know if there's ever been a directive, but I believe that what might be a directive someday, if this becomes a problem, is that you're not allowed to pay them less than what they were being paid in the traditional system. That I've not seen anything written about this, but I've heard discussions related to negotiating a lower salary than what people have been paid in the traditional system. You can certainly, by the way, negotiate if you're using an agency and you have a certain rate with them. Let's say they're a behavioral agency, but they're not going to be providing behavioral therapy for you. Maybe they're going to be being a job coach or help you, with some directions around cooking or something. If they're not providing that behavioral therapy and they're not having to do the reporting requirements and the supervision requirements that exist within traditional behavioral agencies, you may be able to negotiate a lower rate with them so that to provide that particular narrow, different kind of task for you. But we'll have to see, but you can definitely increase things. That's never going to be a problem, is to pay people more if you have the money in your budget. Go ahead, Ed.
Next question is from Selvin. Do regional centers share 12-month expenditures, difficult word, with families before families apply for the self-determination program?
So there's two ways. So that's what we were talking about earlier. There is a requirement in the law that every family should get a list at least one time a year of what is being spent on their behalf. That's a statute that I think went into effect in 2009 roughly. And then separate from that, when you want to go into self-determination, the regional center has to provide that information so that the IPP team can use that as they're developing the person's individual budget.
So it's to make it very, very clear, everyone, regardless of whether you're in the self-determination program, should be getting a list of your expenses at least once a year. You can, though, ask for that list of expenses and at any time, and they should be able to give it to you for the last 12 months. Remember, the list of your last 12 months of what a regional center has spent on you is not the same thing as your individual budget. It is the start of your individual budget, but it is not the end of your individual budget. So if you ask for your last 12 months of expenses, it's actually a very simple process at a regional center. They click a few buttons and they put the dates that they want, and you should be able to get that within a day or two. So if you're even having problems just getting that, I would really strongly suggest you reach out to a supervisor at your regional center or reach out to DDS through the ombudsperson or the self-determination office at DDS, because getting that 12 months expenditure is a very, very simple ask and you should get it. Go ahead, Ed.
Our next question is from Cindy. If a client has a small budget and wants to use the entire amount on one thing during 1 month, do they need to pay the FMS for the other 11 months when they are not using their services at all?
Wow, that is the first time I've ever heard that question. What do you think, Catherine?
I feel like you selected FMS and there's a rate that person is paid every month.
Mm-hmm.
And for you to have access to the FMS services, you're going to have to pay for that every month. Maybe you can negotiate with your FMS to have sort of a maintenance fee like, say, I'm not really going to ask you to pay for anything for the remainder of the time. I just need a fee to remain in your system so that when I come back next year, you're not going to have the cost of setting it up. But
that's a good point. So I want to just reiterate that because the monthly fees are maximum monthly fees. They're not set rates. So if the fee is $100 a month, that's a maximum. So you may be able to go back to them, as Catherine suggested, and say, we're only going to use you for this month. There's not going to be any work for you. Can we use $10 a month to just maintain our status with you? That is such an unusual case because I've never heard of anybody only needing regional center services for 1 month a year. So that's interesting.
It's and I think there was a good point, like the FMS generally budgets takes their fees to say this is coming off the top for the whole year. I think I was just suggesting that if you're not really going to be using those services, you could have a conversation with your FMS. They may say yes, they may say no, but that's sort of the option you have, I think, to have a conversation with the FMS. Like, I'm not going to be any work. I'm not going to call you, all of those things.
Right. Go ahead, Ed.
Next question is from Tamara. Is a computer for a minor a parental responsibility or luxury item?
So again, I would say, like, why does the person need the computer? Is that going to allow them, for example, to communicate because they have very limited speech? And then don't think we would say that having a device that somebody can use to be able to talk, for example, is a luxury item. So again, look at your IPP, figure out what the needs are, connect it back to a goal, and that's how you can get something provided for a minor as well as for an adult.
And we've gone over this, everyone. We are saying all the time that it needs to be connected to an IPP goal, and your IPP goals are generally connected to a person's disability. So it is not like an IPP goal can be, I'd like to travel around the world. That's a phenomenal person-centered plan goal, but that is not necessarily an IPP goal because it's not related to your disability. But if you, let's say, an IPP goal is that you are learning how to move through your community and understand how public transportation works, so that your ultimate goal is then you could understand public transportation in other cities and other communities. It ultimately meets both goals, an IPP goal about moving through your community more independently, as well as your person-centered goal, which is to be able to travel more. So you always want to remember it's your disability and your IPP that really drives what you're allowed to put in your spending plan, but ultimately everything is informed by your person-centered plan, okay?
And I think the other thing just for minors and computers is people legitimately can say school districts should be providing children with computers because they are the primary provider of services while you're in public schools. So you most likely will need to go ask your school district for what you're asking to pay for out of your individual budget. There may be reasons that the school district's not going to provide it, or there may be reasons that the IPP indicates that you need it on times that are unrelated to school. But I don't want you to be disappointed if the answer is you need to ask the school, because they are what's called a generic resource for things that minors might need that are in school.
So this next question will have to be the last question for Catherine, because she needs to take off as well to another event.
The next question is from Nia. I'm setting up my son's budget. Are there different rates in ILS for community instruction?
So I'm certain there are different rates in independent living because there's different regional centers, there's different providers, etc. So yes, I'm sure there's different rates. What actually matters is thinking about what is the rate that you need to pay that's both reasonable, but will help secure staff that can meet the individual needs that your son daughter has, and then identify that as the rate that you want to pay that fits within your spending plan.
I think just to add that there is a real lack of transparency about rates. So I believe that independent facilitators, as they're trying to advocate for their client, are at a tremendous disadvantage because the rates are very secretive. So it might be that this individual requires a higher level of support and therefore might have a higher rate in the traditional system. But in fact, the regional center comes in and offers the lowest rate possible. And we don't have any public information about that. So I'm hoping it all gets cleaned up over the course of the next year when new rates are going into effect for traditional service providers, when there won't be like lots and lots of different rates depending on whether the provider signed a contract many years ago or more recently. So.
And DDS is in a process of going, they did a rate study. There's a process to adjust the rates. I think one of the topics, all of you might be interested in is, and it has not been finally solved for self-determination, but what is the impact of the rate adjustments that will happen starting in April and going forward for people that are in the self-determination program. And there is some effort within this to provide a clearer way of understanding what the rates are that are being paid.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you
so much. I just say thank you for the opportunity to see all of you. It's been great. You're a great group to speak with, and you're clearly working really hard to get into self-determination. You're asking smart questions. So I just really appreciate you. And, we're still at the very beginning. Not everything's going to work perfectly and smoothly, but that is our goal, to get to a place that can happen. And so continue on and simultaneously be patient to make it work for you. So thanks so much. I'll see you all later.
Thanks, Catherine. Join us anytime. We always love to have you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. All right, we will attempt. I noticed that Katie Hornberger, I believe, is here. Well, I just looked her up, but now she may have left. So Katie Hornberger, our ombudsperson, was here. And she, I believe, had to get off as well. So I and others, there's lots of people on here who are experts who can try to answer some of your remaining questions. So go ahead, Ed.
Sure. Our next question that we have is from Debbie. Our FMS is saying that they are delayed in getting background checks back and an employee is getting registered. My regional center cut funding on Halloween, and the self-determination program was supposed to start for us November 1st. But my son has needs and we are unable to get the providers paid because they cannot be registered yet with the FMS. What should I do?
Yeah, that's really a significant problem that we've heard since the very beginning of the self-determination program where people's background checks were getting stuck somewhere at the Department of Justice or at DDS. And, that has to go directly to DDS. That's not something that your regional center can help with. Your FMS has no responsibility for it. This is a State Department of Justice doing the background check, handing the results over to DDS, who then send them to your FMS. I know that was a lot of different acronyms there, but it's the Department of Justice to the Department of Developmental Services and hands it out to your financial management service. So I don't know whether it's often the reason why people get stuck that I've heard is that they have a minor offense from potentially many years ago, which creates a minor red flag and therefore needs to be worked out. So I highly, highly recommend that you reach out to DDS at sdp@dds.ca.gov. I'll try to put it in the chat as we're listening to our next person, Nukala. I don't know if I'm saying your name right. Go ahead.
Yes. About the providers putting their paperwork through to the FMS, what is happening is I think the charge of $84 or whatever they charge for the fingerprinting or something, for the scan. I think that is being too expensive for providers who are seeking a few hours of employment. So is there a way that we could include that in the budget, or maybe get a discount from the FMS or something worked out to make it easier for providers to join the SDP program? That would create more opportunity for providers to come into this program.
Really excellent question, because remember that providers, even in the traditional system, have to get a new background check in the self-determination program, even if they have a current one in their traditional employment. Right. So unfortunately, it's very, very clear in statute that a background check cannot be paid for by a person's individual budget. And the discount that you wouldn't be getting from your FMS, because the FMS is actually not doing the background check. The background check is generally from one of these, fingerprinting companies. Right. And so here is my backroom suggestion, because you are not allowed to pay for it through the budget, is that you are absolutely allowed to offer a person an increased wage for a certain period of time that may end up paying them back for that. It would probably could be for a short period of time. But there are ways to put it in to their work salary to be able to say, I believe you can even have signing bonuses. Will Sanford, I'm looking at you. Do you know whether in the self-determination program people can have a signing bonus for taking a new job? I don't know if you can. I'm not sure. I don't know if an FMS is. Do you know, Will?
It's one of those that's going to be in the questionable thing, but right now, given the fact that all traditional providers and everybody in employment is doing that one-time payments, one-time payments are out there. Bonus is usually not the right word. It's usually one-time. It's like one-time payment is out there. The FMSs would have to think more flexibly than they have. So I think that's going to be one of the challenges. But I agree with you. I mean, people have done like training hours that help get them to recoup those dollars on the front end, to do that. So there's ways that people have played with, but yeah, it is, I agree. It's a barrier. And as you've said, historically, if anybody has, and the one that most commonly ticks things off is some sort of driving under the influence or anything that's in that thing will delay clearance.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question. Suppose I hire a person for $20. Now, can I increase the salary to 22, provided that, they have the budget says $24, but I have I started with 20, but can I increase it to 22 and give a pay raise? Would that be allowed?
Yeah. So you can do anything you want in the spending plan as long as you're meeting wage and labor laws, meaning you're above minimum wage. Right. And certainly I've done that in my son's own spending plan, that for the first 6 months, it's X amount per hour. If they stay more than 6 months, and then their salary is increased. What you don't want to do is put in your spending plan a budget of $24 an hour and then tell the FMS to pay them 20. You want your spending plan to align with exactly how much you want to be paying people. Then if you want to increase their hourly rate, then you go back in and you modify your spending plan.
Oh, see, what I did was my spending plan states $24 per hour, but I told the FMS to pay them 20, and I asked them, can I pay them 22 later on? And they said yes. Oh,
okay. So they're letting you do something different than what's written in your spending plan. That's not generally what I've been hearing, is that your spending plan really needs to reflect what is the current state. So here's what you could do in your spending plan, honestly, is you could have two different columns, two different rows in your spending plan. Spending plan one, an aide at $20 an hour at spending, and then another call, for up to X amount of hours per year, and then another row which says $22, and you are just pointing to which one. But I would make sure that the way you're spending your money with the FMS really reflects what's in your spending plan, even if you're modifying your spending plan.
Okay, that's good to know, because I mean, maybe I should just increase it to 24 then.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, absolutely. If you can afford it, that'd be great. We'll go ahead on that.
Yeah, I should say my only comment is the other one is in your spending plan is you can put in a range.
Yeah.
Which says I'm going to play between $20 and $25 based on experience, whatever, which gives you the flexibility. And the same thing is often is used in if you're going to hire people who are not vendors but are going to be paid as vendors, so independent contractors. You may have a range of $50 to $100 an hour based, so you can have some flexibility as to what you're paying people. So I try to, in the spending plan, the more that you can write broad flexibility into it, the less often you'll have to go back and redo it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, because mine are absolute figures. And what's happening is one of the providers that we have in the plan was, say, at a YMCA, but it was a package deal. And now those providers are not even available. And when I am trying to get someone outside, it's like a $40 difference, in price. So where am I going to get that? So
yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
All right, we only have about 5 minutes left. I think I'm caught up on the chat, and I'm seeing.
Oh, I have some anonymous questions.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ed.
Sure. My first anonymous question, this actually might be the only one, is how is DDS monitoring regional centers that are doing horribly and creating additional barriers? For example, Orange County and South Central are not treating families fairly. Reducing budgets before family, for example, they are reducing budgets before families enter the self-determination program. They are dictating the spending plan, and they're using an authoritarian environment. So how does DDS monitor those and sanction them?
I would say that DDS is not monitoring them well, and their apps, there's no opportunity. They've never sanctioned regional centers for anything except for fiscal problems or somebody stealing money. So get that out of your head, that there's ever going to be any kind of consequence for something a regional center does bad, because it's rarely ever happened. However, we now have new opportunities. We have an ombudsperson who we are supposed to be asking to help make this program better and to help reduce the barriers for our participation. You all should, it's just an interim ombudsperson, Katie Hornberger. She is not going to be the permanent person, but she is there now, and she's creating the office and is certainly setting things up in a way that is going to be very important for us. I strongly urge you to file complaints to the ombudsperson. I saw in the chat earlier that somebody said, has anybody gotten a response from the ombudsperson? That's when I saw that, I saw Katie was on, I wanted to try to bring her in, and I'll reach out to her to find out how long people should be expected to wait before getting a response. I want you all to remember that she just started the office, and I think she might be the only person who works there right now. So I'm going to give her a bit of slack that she's not getting back to people that fast. On the other hand, there are some systemic issues that I'm really hoping she'll address first, because when you change the way the whole regional center thinks about self-determination, or a whole state, then you're solving a lot of people's problems at the same time, as opposed to having to do it one by one. So I'm hoping that she's doing that. So I'll try to touch base with her before our next SGP Connect to get that sense. Go ahead, Ed. Last question.
So our last question is from Nia. Should caregivers register for workman's comp?
Absolutely. It's required by law, and your FMS will help you attain it. If you're using the sole employer model, you should be, you would have to get the workers' comp on your own, but your FMS can help you and you can pay for it through your budget. If you're using the sole employer model, you can also, by the way, find it on your health insurance. I'm sorry, your homeowner's insurance. That's what we use for my son's employees. But if you use the co-employer model, it's already in there. Your FMS is already charging you that. Go ahead, Harv.
Also, you can get in your renter's policy, if people don't own the home,
yeah,
you can get that. I'm ex-military, and USAA is very generous on what they do for vets and anybody who's a member.
That's great. Thanks,
Very
Harvey.
very inexpensive.
Right. And I just want to address one last, it's not really a question related to the SDP, but Cindy is talking about the fact that there are experienced regional center employees leaving the regional centers because they're of their requirement to get vaccinated. First of all, that's sad. It's sad to me that they're willing to give up a job that they've obviously had for a very long time in order to avoid getting something that could save the lives of the people that they serve. So there's that. You know, we're very strong proponents of vaccination here at DVU, and we're the ones that really lobby to get that requirement in for regional center employees to get vaccinated. So I don't have a huge amount of sympathy, I have to be honest. However, I'm not sure that they're in any way causing a bottleneck for criminal background checks, because that is truly happening at the statewide level, at either the Department of Justice or the Department of Developmental Services. Regional centers are not involved at all in the criminal background checks. And it's almost certainly because the person has some sort of criminal, some sort of DUI, as Will said, or some sort of, it's usually quite a small offense that they've had in their history, and that requires some further investigation by the Department of Justice. So I really think that that's probably where things are happening. So I'm going to, we're 6:01, so we're going to end now. But what I want to first of all say is for everyone to have a wonderful Thanksgiving. We will not be having SDP Connect next week, but we wouldn't have had it anyway because we're doing it every other week. We will be back on December 1st. I'm wondering, I know we are over, but Ed and I have been going back and forth about whether we should have an SDP Connect on, I believe it's December 5th. Hold on, I'll get you the exact date. It would be December 15th. December 15th is would be the 2 weeks after. I want to be, I am Jewish, so December 15th works great for me. But I want to be respectful of those of you who may be caught up at that time, 10 days before Christmas. I don't know if you're shopping, or I don't know what you're doing 10 days before Christmas. You're certainly not eating yet. I would hope not. So I guess I would love if people are still around to get a sense of whether you would still want to have SDP Connect on December 15th, or whether we want to go ahead and wait until after the first of the year. Because we're certainly not going to do it between Christmas and New Year's, because people are really shut down then. So if you want to do the 15th, Tommy's saying it's good. She's my fellow Jewish person, so she and I are in the same boat on this. But if people want to give a thumbs up, you can do in the reactions. You can do a thumbs up like I'm doing, or you can do even. Oh, you can't. Can you do a thumbs down? I'm not even sure how you do a thumbs down, but I guess you can't. But you can do whatever you want. If people if email us at info@dvunited.org if you think that this is a terrible idea to have an SDP Connect on the 15th of December. If we don't hear too many thumbs down on it, then we will probably have one. We'll do a little holiday singing or something. We'll make up new words to Christmas carols about the self-determination program. No, I'm not promising that. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to our interpreters. As always, we are thankful to all of you in the DVU world, in our DVU land, and have a wonderful, wonderful Thanksgiving. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.